We have talked a lot about bargains, mid-prices and value players already this preseason, but it's the big names who bring in most of our SuperCoach points. It's time to talk premiums on the official SuperCoach AFL show. These are the money men who we invest in to start the year, paying big bucks for big points every week. Well, that's how it's supposed to work. Anyway, as with our mid-price and cheapie shows, we're going to survey an expert panel and dissect the names we are considering at the top of the price list in every position. That panel today is myself, Al Paton. I've got Dos back with us again for the third instalment of these. So, Dossie, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bit of a sort of rare pod for me to be speaking on. Usually not the guns and rookies kind of guy, so going to be struggling to find those premiums. Usually a sort of a mid-price kind of operator, but we'll see how we go today. Keen to get stuck in.
Yeah, you've got to spend that money somewhere. And, of course, we have two special guests joining us. Firstly, the co-founder of Insight Fantasy Sports Podcast and an AFL and BBL SuperCoach expert. Welcome, SuperCoach Horse.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on. And from the Keeper League podcast as well, we have Heff joining us.
Thanks for having me, boys. Great to make my debut on the SuperCoach podcast. Hopefully I don't let you boys down. And, we come up with some premiums to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just reading the description of the Keeper pod on the website there, and it says, the podcast that doesn't focus on the superstars. We look at the up-and-comers and lesser-known players to help you win your draft and Keeper League. So this is a little bit of a stitch-up throwing you on the premium pod, but I will be fascinated to see get a perspective on some of these superstars from a draft point of view, because obviously SuperCoach draft is getting bigger and bigger every year, and if you get some early picks, these are the ones we'll be looking at. So it'd be great to talk some premiums as well. But I thought off the top we'd get some quick injury news out, because there is a little bit about just in the last few days, which might impact what we talk about today. First of all, just on the rookies front, Sid Draper, obviously big name rookie over in South Australia at the Crows. Just some reports that they're holding him back a little bit with maybe a little bit of back soreness or some general soreness there for Sid over summer. So just wanted to keep an eye on. He's one of those high-priced rookies that we have been looking at. But when it comes to the big premos, Christian Petracca obviously can't take a trick, had a shocking injury last year, and then reports out of training last week that he's suffered a cracked rib, and the Demons say a timeline on his recovery will be determined in due course. Josh Barnes from the Herald Sun was down at Demons training this morning, and I saw that he said track was down there running some laps, looked in pretty decent nick, just on light duties obviously, but still no timeline on exactly when we'll see him back. And Nick Daicos is the other big one, who has reportedly been placed on a modified preseason program after some mild plantar fasciitis. So that's not what we want to hear. Just quickly, Horse, what do you make of this injury news? Do we just cross these guys off straight away, or how do you take this in?
I don't think so. We're still early in January, so a couple of months left before the season starts. Plantar fasciitis, given that it may or may not be too serious, depending on what the medical report is, can be managed throughout a season. And given that Daicos is as good as what he is, and that Collingwood look to get him the ball whenever possible, it might not be too bad. But with Petracca at Melbourne, I feel like the non-disclosure, I guess, of a time frame goes back to last year and what happened with his injury. So watch this space on that news.
Yeah, that's a big red flag for me, that one. And yeah, Daicos will be interesting to watch as well. So just a reminder, subscribe to the show wherever you're listening, or if you're watching on Code Sports YouTube, that's where you can go and watch all our podcasts this year. Don't miss an episode. And of course, we've got lots more bumper preseason content coming your way. So the format here is a bit of a sort of a draft where we take it in turns to call out a name, not necessarily the first guy we want to pick, but someone we want to talk about who we think will be an interesting primo this year in SuperCoach. And Dossie has spun the wheel, and he assures us that this is all legitimate, and I'm going to back him in because he's given me the first selection here, and then we'll have Heff, Horse, and Dossie bring up pick 4. So, yeah, I guess we'll have to say he's doing it on the up and up there. But I'll throw out a name to start with, and we'll start in the midfield. And I want to talk about Caleb Serong, because he's someone that I'm very tempted to pick straight off the bat this year after he was a great selection. Last year got on him quite early doors. He's priced at $623K, so you are paying up 116 average that is based on. But so that's obviously what he averaged last year. The question mark, I guess, he had 17 scores over 100, 6 under, but the lowest was 84. So that's pretty reliable. He's averaged 90, 111, then 116 over the past 3 years, 24 years old. So all trending in the right direction. The only question mark, I guess, is that he started so hot last year, averaging 130 in the first 10 rounds, then only 104.5 on the run home. So got a little bit of attention from taggers in that period. But I guess it's just a question of where do we think he'll land this year, and is he someone we want to pick straight from the start. Heff, any thoughts I'll throw to you on Caleb Serong this year? And obviously, we've talked a fair bit in all our pods about the fixture this year and that the Dockers have a great run, no early bye, and then a really nice bye in the middle of the year, which is another thing in his favour.
Yeah, the bye's a huge factor, only having that. I think he's on the round later on with St Kilda. So you've got quite a few rounds with him early on with him playing and stuff like that. But the thing with Serong as well, like he was a player at the start of last season I thought was really going to struggle just given the depth of Fremantle's midfield. And he kind of proved us wrong last year. And I think we saw like players like Hayden Young starting in there and playing really prominently in the midfield and then moving out later on in the season. It kind of just adds a little bit more depth to what Caleb Serong can actually provide us in the midfield as well. So I don't know. I think it's a reasonable pick. I don't think there's any reason why he can't go bigger than what he did last season, given that he's just another year older. We've seen there's a bit more of an avenue to go in there. The only question mark, I guess, is what I mentioned earlier: is will those other midfielders that are around him, will they hinder him more? But like I said, I think Fremantle have proven that all those midfielders can kind of function in their game plan together. So I think it's a really good pick.
What are your thoughts, Dossie, on Serong? And I've sort of put a little asterisk to sneak a second player in, which is not really following the rules here. But I mean, Andy Brayshaw is another one I'm really keen on. A little bit cheaper at Freo, and he had a great. He sort of bit the opposite of Serong. Really flew home, averaged about 120 in the last sort of 7 or 8 rounds. So maybe he's not getting the tag or attention. Maybe it's going more to Serong these days.
Yeah, I'm really keen on starting with at least one of those Docker midfielders. I just don't know which one it is at this stage. I think Serong, to all your points you've made and to Heff's points as well, I think he's probably the safest of the bunch. Just we've seen him do it this year. He's clearly their number one go-to out of centre bounce, and he's just so clean with it. I don't think the only thing that's going to hinder him is those tags, as you mentioned. I think we're going to probably see pretty similar output, but if he does get hampered by a few tags, I think maybe the guys around him can get that chance to shine. And whether that's a Brayshaw or a Hayden Young getting more exposure, does Nat Fyfe get a bit less than he did last year, would be probably the other way that he can increase his scoring in there as well. Yeah, look, I think it's a great pick, and I'm keen for a Docker. I just want to see how it plays out in the preseason. I'm not sure which one I'm going to pick, but Horse, I think I'm keener on one of the cheaper guys just because there's a bit more value to be had there, I think.
Yeah, I think Freo are in for a big year this year. And Caleb Serong, I believe, will lead the way in the middle. He goes at 1.14 points per minute, 79% CBAs last year. But also this year, something that has come to our attention in the last couple of weeks is a very fit-looking Sean Darcy. So you see the way that he's got his body back into shape. He's a very good tap ruckman. This is also going to increase the points where centre clearances come into it. You've got a fit Sean Darcy tapping it down, Brayshaw, Young, and Serong's throat. It's very dynamic in there for the Dockers.
Yeah, no, that we did take that image did get shared around of Shrek looking very shredded, and obviously we've talked before that Dossie's all over him this year. Bit of value there, so he loves that. We better move on to pick 2 if we're calling it that, and that's over to you, Heff.
Well, if this is a draft, I don't know, it's not really a draft, but we probably should turn our attention to the rucks, I think, because there's really only 3 I reckon you're going to be considering. Maybe 4 you're probably considering to start off with. But looking at the kind of pointy end from last season, you've got Tristan Xerri, you've got Max Gawn, and you've got Rowan Marshall as your top 3. I know there's a bit of talk about TDK as well going forward, given he's probably a little bit underpriced. But I want to talk about Tristan Xerri to start off with. I fell in love with that guy last year. He ended up in our Keeper League draft pool and ended up taking him in the first round, and was just, to pick up a player like that in a draft who can just be a captain option each week and kind of rockets up to one of the top scorers in the game. It's incredible to actually be able to, have a player that do that. And I think just the way he kind of goes about his scoring, there is some scope for some regression this season, but I'll kind of focus on why I think he's a good pick. And it's just the way he goes about his scoring, really. It's just, you get the ruck contest, quite often he'll take it out of the ruck, give a handball off, effective disposal that way. If it doesn't really go to plan, he'll probably lay a tackle in there as well. It's just such a good avenue for scoring for him. I think there is some concern on the back of that North midfield might get a bit more efficient, so there might be less stoppages for him to kind of clean up at and stuff like that. But if you're looking at the other rucks in that kind of category, Max Gawn's getting on in age. He's already got some sort of throat issue, voice box issue.
Yeah,
that he's got,
yeah,
something like that in the preseason. Plus, he did have a few injury concerns last year. Rowan Marshall, is obviously the other kind of star ruckman, and I think you can be pretty confident with him. But I think Cherry's going to score more than him this season. I'm going to lock in Cherry as my first kind of pick that we're kind of talking about. Any thoughts there, boys?
Oh, he's just a gun, isn't he? If he wasn't in your team towards the back end of last year, you were in real trouble. So came home with a wet sail. And, I know there was a bit of talk that there was some fixture, helping him there, having a pretty light ruck run to finish the year. But overall, Cherry, he's always been able to rack up possessions and also do all the ruck craft around the ground. So, yeah, it's a really tough question as to who, if you are paying really top end dollar, who you go with. And I think Cherry for me is the winner at the moment as being the guy that I'm willing to pay maximum price for heading into this year, knowing that, he could be a competition winning pick in that if you don't have him, you could be just that far behind the rest of the competition if you do go with some of these more value rucks. So I think to stabilize my squad, I might be going with a Tristan Xerri, given just we've seen how big he can go and the ceiling scores are just captaincy option every week is just another consideration, Horse.
Yeah, love the pick. His hit-outs to advantage went up by over 20% last year as well. And I love the fact that Heff brought up his tackling, so his follow-up work after the initial hit-out. 7.5 tackles per game. That's unheard of for a ruckman. But averaging 1.2 points per minute. And as you said, 5-round average to finish the year of 148 last year. The ceiling is so high. For me, it's a set and forget.
Just to play devil's advocate a little bit, I did some research the other day for just some work I was doing, and I worked out that only 11 players have averaged 7+ tackles per game and maintained that the following season. So if he actually does that, he's going to be an illustrious company, really, to be actually able to do that. So like I was saying before, there is some scope for some regression, but there's just so many avenues for him to score. Plus, there's just no competition at North Melbourne. There's a whole heap of factors. And then if we're talking keeper leagues as well, the age profile as well, 25 is a baby for a ruck as well. So, if you're putting that hat on too, you just tick so many boxes.
For sure.
Yeah, I was just looking at the North list and the trade ins and outs just to make sure, but no, I was right in thinking they didn't bring anybody in. There's really I'm not even sure who their number 2 is down there.
Coleman Jones.
Yeah, maybe. And he's out injured at the moment. So it's all cherries to take it all before him. So yeah, we're happy with him in the ruck. I think. I mean, Gawn's the other one that you just don't want to sleep on him. I mean, Melbourne, they're obviously a huge watch this year. What are they going to do? Surely they're going to improve, and they managed to dodge the early bye as well. So we know what Gawn's ceiling is, and if he puts up some of those 160, 170 scores early on, we might have to all scramble to think what we want to do. But he is 33, so yeah, it's probably the easy call to make. Let's go with the younger guy. Horse, you're up next. Do we want to choose a new position, or where are we going?
I'm going to go back to the mids, and for me, it's a little bit of a toss-up between Marcus Bontempelli and Zak Butters. But I'm going to go Zak Butters because, one, you guys could talk about Marcus Bontempelli, but two, I really like the Port Adelaide draw the first half of the year. So when we're talking about Zak Butters, 17 times over 100 and 12 times over 120 last year, runs at about 72% disposal efficiency and has got some real X factor about him. Their draw to start the year, they've got the Pies away, the Tigers at home, the Dons away, Saints at home, Hawks at home, Swans away, North at home, Dogs away, and then Crows at home. He does have the first major bye in round 12, but I think you could get some real value there with that fixture.
Yeah, just when you say Richmond, it just the lights are popping off because I think what did he score in the last year? About 180 or something like that. So you could probably expect something similar again. I mean, just not as hot on Butters as I was last year, and I can't really put a finger on it. And I was thinking maybe his scores in the finals were really, really down, but came out later on that he was playing. I think he had a cracked rib, and clearly wasn't right. So that's probably just putting me off a tiny bit. Would have been nice if that happened in the last couple of rounds of the season, a couple of lower scores to bring his price down.
To bring his price down,
But I mean, Dos, could you pick him and Bont, or do you have to pick one of the two?
Oh, yeah, I've got a sort of love-hate relationship. Never hate, but love-hate sort of vibe with Butters in that I'm just always so worried about him crashing into packs. Like he's just a battering ram. He has no self-preservation in him to be able to sort of hold back from the contest. So the only reason I'd be worried about Zak Butters is his own willingness to hit the contest with the ferocity that he does. Often can lead to him getting bumped and bruised. But starting both would just be, locking yourself into complete guns and rookies. But if you're going that strategy and we're high on both players, why not? They're both shown a consistency to their scoring. And Butters could spend more time in the midfield is the other funny thing. Like he doesn't spend Port have quite a big distribution of who starts in their centre bounce. And if we see guys like an Ollie Wines start to move out, or if they favour just playing those core big three in there, if you will, we could see Butters somehow, even though he did average 120, it's hard to replicate that. We could see him sort of enter the Bont stratosphere of continually going that 120 plus. So I'm probably leaning towards not doing it just based on structure, but I have no qualms with going both Butters and Bont to start the season.
If you had an early pick, Heff, who would you take of those two if you were looking at a top-end mid?
Well, I'm Port Adelaide man, so it'd be a bit hard to go past Butters, I think. I do think there is scope for improved scoring, but if you look at Port's lineup and things like that, and I'll get to this when I talk about, we'll hopefully get to pick another player later on. There might be a few changes in terms of who plays forward, who's spending time forward, and who's spending more time in the midfield as well. But I won't give away too much just yet. We'll talk about that later.
Ooh, okay, we'll keep us on tender hooks. But Dossie, you've got the final pick here in the first round.
Yeah, and true to fashion, I'm going to have to go with a little bit of a point of difference in my first pick, and potentially not, probably more in that underpriced premium bracket, because I know we're going to be talking about a lot of the big dogs in this game, but I think that this is going to be one of the top scoring ruckmen this year, and I'm going to talk about my man, TDK, Tom De Koning, 547K. You are paying up a premium. Averaged over 100 last year, but if anyone was an owner, they would remember that patch last season where he just went absolutely monstrous. Mid-season run of 130, 140, 146, 176, and 128. And I will be admitting to having him captain on the 176, kind of swaying that opinion. And the fact that I'm still keen on this guy after he burnt me towards the back end of last year when I had 0 trades and he was injured shows that I really have a lot of faith in this guy. Can rack up possessions, and every single one of them is contested. He's an extra midfielder for the Carlton team. The only issue, the lingering elephant in the room, is Mark Pittonet. Does he play? Do Carlton have him in their plans? If they do, clearly put a line through him. But if we're starting the season and TDK is a solo ruck at Carlton, he could have plus 20 points upside. That's how good this guy is. So the other factor, I think this is a big one too, contract year. So heading into free agency, it is TDK's contract year. What are you going to do? You're going to add an extra couple of zeros on the end of that contract if you play well. So just look out for a big season from Tom De Koning. I think despite him being in that underpriced premium price bracket, I think you could be getting a guy that's easily going to be over 600K, and pretty quickly if he does replicate what he did towards the back end of last year.
So I did some quick maths on the Pittonet situation. So he's priced at 101.5 to Koning. And when he played with Mark Pittonet, they played 8 games together last year. He averaged 88. And when there was no Pitto, he had 9 games, averaged 122. So yeah, it's pretty stark contrast there. I mean, Horse, I don't know if you have any numbers in front of you, but he's a very different kind of ruckman, isn't he? Like we talked about Cherry scoring points from some hit-outs, but also, he follows up with tackles and things. But De Koning was getting them in all kinds of different ways for what we normally see from a ruckman. Yeah,
absolutely. The dinner in the De Koning household when he got that 176 would have been interesting too, going up against his brother.
Yeah.
But the Pittonet issue, I believe it's a contract year. So I think they'll lean more into De Koning this year. Personally, he's in my side at the moment. But when we're looking at someone like De Koning, Carlton had something like a 9-1 record when he was the solo ruck. So when you look at that, evidence suggests that Carlton do play well with him as the solo ruck in the side. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went that way.
Yeah, hopefully Vossi will give us a pretty clear indication in the preseason coming into round one, what exactly they're going to do. So back to me with my second pick, and I'm going back into the midfield, and I'm going to talk about a guy that I think I've picked the last 2 years, just waiting for the season when he's going to just average 120, but it still hasn't quite happened yet, and that's Tom Green, priced at 574,000 this year at a 107 average. That's partially explained by that 5-point game against the Swans last year, which brought his numbers down a tiny bit. But he had a weird sort of year where he burst out of the blocks. He was a great pick to start the year, even with an early bye. He was worth having, pumping up some massive numbers. Then he went through a real mid-season slump where he went 5 or 6 weeks barely without cracking 100, and then he came flying home with an average of 155 in the final 10 rounds. So where does he land this year? And still that bye is again rearing its ugly head because he's got the bye in round 2 with the Giants and Gold Coast. I think are both off that week. It is very early on, so we should have a full squad to cover for any missing players. Can you afford to carry one potentially star on the bench? Dossie, what's your thoughts on these bye players? Are you just scratching all of them, or can you find a room for someone like Tom Green?
I'm battling with this exact issue in the early stages at the moment. I'm totally with you in that Tom Green. I think that, look, who else is in there to spend time in the midfield? I think he at his average, it was only 100. He's got a baked in injury score. Like, I think the only way is up, but round 2, what do we do? Like, what value? I'm no maths man. I don't know, how many more points do I need to make it worth it? I mean, Horse, you seem to be a bit of the numbers background. Is it possible? Because I've got him in my sights. If he's got, how much upside do we need from Tom Green going from that 102 average or whatever it is up to, 115, 120? What do we need, Horse?
So he's 5 years in the AFL system. He's gone points per minute wise. He's gone at 1.05, 0.87, 0.96, 1.05 and 1.04. So he's never really reached the heights of your 1.2s of Cherry, your 1.19s of Bontempelli. For me, for his scoring to improve, he needs to kick more than any handballs. So last year, he averaged 17.5 handballs per game and 13.4 kicks per game. I'd like to see that maybe average to 50-50 in order for his scoring to improve. I understand that he's an inside midfielder and clearances are worth points. I understand that. And handballs have hit the target. I understand that. But kicking over distance and hitting targets for more points, that's where I see the upside in Tom Green.
Yeah, hitting targets is a big one.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking as well, just kind of with what Dossie said before. I reckon there is some scope though, even if, and you do make a good point, Horse, he is a bit more of a handballer, more than a kicker. But I think with the players that are going to be around him, like, so Peatling is gone, obviously. Canelio is like on his last legs, it feels like. It feels like he can't even stay fit and play.
He's been around forever.
Exactly. So it's like they're the kind of the main dudes last year that were kind of doing the work at the coalface. And Tom Green's now just this absolutely the number one guy in there to do that work. So even like on the way he plays, and if that is his style, I reckon there's just scope for a few extra, handballs and things like that might boost his scoring just a little bit. But I do 100% agree that, he's coming into his 5th, 6th year season in the AFL level. 6th, yeah. Like you probably would have seen more. You'd hope you'd have seen more from him by now to prove he's going to be that super premium scorer. That's all.
Yep. Fair. Well, that's why he comes with a little bit of discount, but there's a little bit of risk attached as well. Horse, you've got the next selection here. Who do you like? What do we have to about, like pick 6 or something?
Yeah, I think, well, we haven't brought up Bont yet. So let's talk about the Bont. Just an awesome SuperCoach player. Was number 1 2023 and 2024. He's ranked number 2 at averages of 126 points per game and 129 SuperCoach points per game. The Dogs love to get the ball to him at every opportunity, and he does average 1.2 points per minute, which is elite when we're talking SuperCoach. He does go up 68% disposal efficiency, for those of you worried about his ability to hit targets, but he accumulates points where others don't, where tapping the ball to advantage and doing the shepherds and the little 1%ers that get him the extra 5 to 10 points that you don't see many other players getting. He does have a round 12 bye. He misses all the early buys, but he does have the first major bye. One other thing I will bring up before we do discuss further on Bont is that in each of the last 3 seasons, he has a score of 180 or above.
Yeah, I mean, do you pay a bit of a premium for the captaincy double there? I mean, I like that you brought up that stat about the tap on. I know Champion Data, love that one. The knock-on to advantage, which is part of the SuperCoach scoring formula. And I think I haven't got the exact figures in front of me, but Bont has like more than twice as many as the next best player in the comp. He's just so good at that. And sometimes when you see his score just keeps going up and up and up, and you're thinking, I haven't seen heaps of him, but he's still managing to find ways to score points because the SuperCoach formula just suits him absolutely down to a T. And obviously, when you get those bit of a boost if you kick a goal, right on the death to win the game, we've seen him do that on regular occasions as well. So, he just ticks all the boxes. It's just, it's hard to maintain that high level of scoring for continuously year after year. Are we going to see a drop off at some stage? I mean, Dossie, you worried at all about the Bont, or we used to worry about him getting bevoed and stuck in the forward pocket and things, but that doesn't seem to be so much of an issue nowadays. He's just too good.
I'm worried paying that much for anyone at the end of the day, but when it comes to Bont, I don't think, it's kind of like my Cherry situation, but you've got years more data in terms of just he's done it over and over again. So I feel the safest locking him in as my top end premium just because we've seen him do it time in, time out. And one thing that's just an added wrinkle, and it's completely not to do with the data at all, it's just a gut feel. This guy, he's been that close to a Brownlow a couple of times. He needs one in his career, and he might have potentially been robbed a couple of times as well. But the Bont coming into this season, it was just a look in his eye. He's winning. He's coming top 3 in the time trials. It's just a sort of, it's his year this year, I feel, where we get potentially even bigger average out of him. 126, that's hard to say, but the gut feel says that the Dogs are going to have a big year and the Bont's going to have a big year. But I think, based on just data alone, he's just done it many times. So we can probably just expect a 120 regardless of how the Dogs play, how he plays. Heff?
Yeah, I agree with that, Dossie. And just looking at their midfield again, similar to that kind of Tom Green situation, but just look around the players around them. I think you're more likely to see midfielders around him fall away than you are to see Bont fall away. So I'd be, if anything, you might see someone like Libba, cop that final head knock and it'd be sad or whatever if it happens. But that might force him out, and it just kind of increases that kind of usage for him at that centre bounces if it's not high enough already. And then same with someone like Treloar as well, getting on a bit, doesn't have the best injury history. It won't take much. And I guess you got Kennedy coming in, he could do some stuff in their midfield as well. But it wouldn't take much for there to be just even more increased opportunity as well when you factor in the time that he sits forward as well. If less of that happens, there's just a few factors there that could actually, not only help him maintain that scoring, but even increase it. And then I 100% agree with that thirst for that Brownlow medal. I think you could still see Bont score, even better next season.
Yeah, so Horse last year, the lowest price he got all season, he started over 700K, but the lowest he got was 614,000. This year he's 681. Is there any value in holding off and trying to get him a bit cheaper at some stage, or is the sort of guy you just pay up and don't worry about it?
We talk about set and forgets for rucks. I think he's your set and forget midfielder this year.
Yep. All right. Simple as that. Pick 2 in the draft and make sure I get the order follow it correctly. Heff, back to you, mate.
All right. I might go to that one I alluded to earlier. It's probably a bit early in the draft for it, but if we are drafting, we need to think about our forward line because there's limited options up there. So, and being a Port supporter, let's have a look at Jason Horne-Francis. So I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but what did he average last year? It was 100 on the dot, I believe. Yeah. And looking at the forward line and the kind of way that he plays as well, I think we're blessed to have him in our forward line to begin with. I think if we remember the splits, it was very close to him being a sole midfielder anyway. So we're kind of blessed to have him in our forward line. But I do think there's scope for an improved score this season to build on that 100-point average. And I guess there's a few reasons for it. So look at the ins that Port Adelaide have done to their forward line. We saw Horne-Francis last year kind of being the Mr. Fix-It when kind of nothing was working in Port's forward line, which is probably their biggest weakness. He was the one to go up there and kind of fix the problems. And now that did increase his, there was a few goals and stuff like that were pretty crucial that did boost his scoring. But I still think you probably want someone like him at the coalface more often would be more beneficial for his scoring. So they brought in Joe Richards, they brought in Joe Berry, they brought in Jack Lukosius. There's 3 players that need to kind of slot into that forward line, which just means there's probably less likelihood of someone like him sitting forward as much. I guess if on the flip side, there might be more the bench time for him to recover. There was a big catastrophe, I guess, in that first final where they started Horne-Francis on the bench and everyone was up in arms and stuff like that. So, whether he's resting up forward or resting on the bench remains to be seen. But I think he can kind of boost his scoring that way. And I think just coming into, his 4th season now, just increase that tank a little bit. That time on ground might bump up just that little bit as well. Plus, looking at the forward lines, the way he plays, the contested ball, the kind of clearances from the midfield, the stuff that you're looking for in a premium midfielder, I guess he does it. That we need for our scoring. So yeah, Horne-Francis locking a forward for me.
If thinking with putting our draft hats on, where would you be looking to take a forward in a draft this year, given the state of what's on offer down there? I mean, do you want to try and get him in early because he's really the only sort of premo of any description, or you just leave them till later on?
Yeah, I think he is in the SuperCoach format. He is the kind of premo that you might go a second round pick on, but even that's high, it'd be late second round, I reckon. But maybe third round is probably somewhere where you're looking for someone like him, because if you do lock in that forward, traditionally you have had that advantage. Especially one that's a class above, like the next guy who's picking a forward up there as well. So, yeah, maybe third round, I would pay that, I think.
Any thoughts on Horne-Francis Horse? Is he an obvious pick in the forward line this year?
For me, yes. And outside of SuperCoach, I think it's between the years for Jason Horne-Francis. If he can control his aggression and just stay on the straight and narrow on the field, I think we're going to see a big jump this year.
That would be an excellent result. Who do you like with your next pick?
Well, that's over to me, Al.
Oh, yes.
He's struggling. It's a recurring theme on these pre-season pods. I think you flipped the order for Heff and Horse there as well, but that's all right, Al. We'll get on through. I love Horne-Francis as well. I think there's still some upside in his average for sure heading into year 4, so massive on him. The player that I'll look at now is in a year where I think the defensive line is really hard to sort of pick those top-end premiums. I'm going with a guy that I was sort of surprised initially when I saw that he still retained the defensive status, and there's probably 2 of those top dogs that did retain that had a few different roles throughout the year. And I'm going to talk about Harry Sheezel from North Melbourne. So the other player there, Sam Flanders, somebody else may talk about him, but the buy round is still just going to be scaring me potentially off starting with him. But North don't have that very early buy. They don't play opening round. We've talked about North Melbourne already. Do they improve as a team? Do they need more help in the midfield? Does Sheezel play in the midfield? Does he play back? That's probably the question you need to ask before you're going to pick him. Or is it? I believe he can score wherever he plays. So I think we do have some sort of numbers there. He's jumped up from a flat 100 average in his rookie year, which is just wild to think. He's gone up to 118 in year 2. Usually we talk about, a third year potential breakout. I don't see him going too much better than the 118. That would be a lot to ask. And in fact, there could be some regression. But there's just not that many guys that can go at that level in the defensive line. We talk about another option, say a Jack Sinclair, who I do think is a potentially good option. He's never gone 118 in his entire career. So we're talking about a guy that has already eclipsed many amazing feats in his short career. He's got the captain ceiling. Just the fact he's available as a defender, I think that he will actually avoid a fair few tags just due to the fact that they've got Luke Davies-Uniacke in there. He's a damaging player. And if he gets off the chain, he's typically been the one that gets hammered by tags. You got Luke Parker coming in, which could be, I don't know how these new players are going to impact. I think Caleb Daniel's going to impact, obviously, in the defensive line. So maybe moving into the midfield will help Harry Sheezel retain these scores. I think there's a lot of question marks, but at the end of the day, I just don't think there's another player with his ceiling, with his ability, with his general just ability to rack up the pill that we've seen Sheezel do now for 2 straight years that is available as a defender in SuperCoach this season. So I think he's going to be a really popular starting pick. I'm interested in your thoughts. both Heff and Horse, so we'll throw over to Horse first, and then I'll get your thoughts as well, Heff. But it's a really tough line for me to decide this year, the defensive line, but Sheezel stands out to me as a starting pick.
Yeah, I love him. We see last year that, as you brought up, his average went up by 18.5 SuperCoach points per game. And this is going from a SuperCoach friendly role across halfback to then playing half forward and through the middle. As a second-year player, this guy is truly special. You hear the reports coming out of North Melbourne that Luke Partner's having a very positive impact at the footy club, and so is Caleb Daniel. Throw in the likes of Georgie Wardlaw, who's an inside beast as well. And this is going to open up so much opportunity for the ball to get into Sheezel's hands and be damaging forward of centre. He's going to play a lot of midfield, 31% CBAs last year compared to 5 in his first season. There is scope for improvement, but if there is, there's not much. But as a defender, if he's averaging, say, 115, which is a 3-point negative from last year, that's still pretty good value for your defensive stocks.
I think with the numbers we've seen, we've got enough evidence to kind of be pretty confident in Sheezel, whether it be on that halfback, which is not looking very likely anymore, or playing as that midfielder. My number one concern with him, and I don't think it's very likely to happen, but it always burns in the back of my mind that he was recruited as a forward, and a very damaging forward as that, and we've seen him play that kind of midfield forward role this year. Do you guys worry at all that we might see him as like that Mr. Fix-It in the forward line to be an avenue for scoring for North Melbourne, which takes him away from that midfield role? What do you guys think?
Well, his role last year was really an interesting watch, because I think roughly the first half of the year he was sort of more in that defence, and then he moved into the midfield, and some people I know, Patch, one of our colleagues, got cold feet and traded him out thinking he's lost his role in SuperCoach, which turned out to be something he regretted pretty quickly. But his role in the second half of the year, and he sort of never got DPP status in those. So I was watching the numbers quite closely for those updates we had in, say, round 12, round 18, because he really split his time between the midfield and the forward line in that second half of the year. So he was, as I think Horse mentioned, he wasn't playing as a pure mid in that time anyway, and he still managed to put up these huge scores. Finished the year with an average of, I think, 131 over his final 4 games. So, hopefully they wouldn't have him playing, as a pure forward, but as long as he's getting a mix of mid-forward time, he's just so damaging when he gets the ball in his hands that I think he can definitely keep putting up those big numbers.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like, it's not something that I'm actually worried about. It's more so just when you look at North Melbourne and their makeup, and they've got like guys that they need to move into that midfield as well. Like McKercher is someone you'd think would move into their full time, and then just with draftees that have O'Sullivan and stuff like that coming through this year. I don't know. I know it's not really a factor for this. Maybe it's my keeper league hat being put on more, but just thinking that. But like I said, the way he kind of scored in that role in the second half of last season, he's given us enough evidence to kind of show us we don't really need to be worried about it. I don't think.
No.
Yeah, they do. They do have a lot of midfielders. North, they keep drafting them, and there's a lot of players potentially SuperCoach relevant too. So, how many any limit, Horse, on how many North players you could start with? If you were looking at a Daniel type as well, Cherry in the ruck, LDU's tempting.
I think 3 is plenty. So you're looking at Cherry, you're looking at Sheezel, and you're looking at Caleb Daniel. Luke Parker's an interesting price, but not for me. Not with the upside of, say, Peatling, who's priced at a similar sort of range there.
I think probably the final point on Sheezel is that just there's that much value that we're seeing available in our defensive lines, and just wanting to have one anchor back there. I might go a bit more, it probably allows me to go a little bit more risky with some of my other picks, because I'm that confident that even, as you say, Horse, if he does regress 5 or 10 points, that still might be good enough to be the number 1 defender for this season. So I'm pretty confident in him as a starting pick just for that factor.
So sticking in defence with my final name, I think that what I'm seeing a lot of around at the moment is people going with, say, 2 big dogs in defence, and then you go down to your value and rookie guys. You've got Callum Mills and Kitty Coleman and these sort of guys who hopefully can put out some decent numbers for us on the field. So when you look at those, the most expensive guys down there, you mentioned Sam Flanders. Just amazing run of scoring last year, was so good for us. But he does have that early bye. Gold Coast also have, Dan Rioli coming in. John Noble as well, so probably think he's not going to be spending much time in the back line anymore. Maybe it doesn't really matter too much, but a few little red flags out there. You want to see how it plays out. Now, Luke Ryan, I mentioned on one of the earlier pods that I did have him in an early version of my team, but I've got a bit cold feet spending all that money on him when he's based on that, he's priced at 116 and he only averaged a little over 100 in the second half of the year, although he always seems to start red hot. Then you've got Whitfield, who was fantastic last year again, round 2 bye. And the next guy is Jack Sinclair, who we did touch on briefly there, who I do really, really like. This is probably based a little bit on the fact that I had him lined up to trade him in last year in about round 15 or so, and something happened. I can't even remember what happened, and I went and did something different, and then I just couldn't get Sinclair for the rest of the year, and he absolutely killed me just watching how well he was scoring. Flew home with an average of 120. Over the final 10 rounds, he's just super consistent, averaged 113, 106, 109 last 3 years. Like I said, finished like a house on fire. Last year, the Saints, have the best draw just about for SuperCoach, as we've talked about. Probably the only question mark around there, I've even marked on here with their fixture that he gets to play Richmond twice. So that's another tick in his favour. But are we concerned at all, Horse, about any of the magnets down there at the Saints? We mentioned, I think Dossie's keen on Ari Schoenmaker maybe filling a rollback there. Josh Battle's gone out. We've got Travalia coming in. Riley Bonner had his 1 year cameo. He's gone. How do you see it all shaking out? Because I think we know Ross likes to throw Sinclair into the midfield at times, but he actually scores better. We're happier when he's just stationed at halfback.
Music to our ears, the Saints picking up Jack Macrae, and if that's the way Rossi Lyon plans on using Macrae, then we're going to see a lot of Sinclair across the halfback line. Let's talk about kicking in. He plays on 95% of the time that he kicks in, which is music to our ears in SuperCoach, because if he hits a target, what's that, +8 SuperCoach points each time he does that. And as you said, Al, averaged 110 last year. He's got DPP, and in his last 11 games, his lowest scores were 86 and 88. So when you're talking about a high ceiling and a low floor, that floor is not really that low when you're talking Sinclair. If a bad game is, his lowest score was 86 after the bye.
Where do you see the Saints this year, Heff?
Much of the same as last year, I reckon. But
somewhere around the middle there, a bit of no man's land.
Exactly. It's the same old story of the Saints, unfortunately. Apologies to any of the listeners out there. Basically what Horse said with Macrae in the midfield, it seems likely that Sinclair is going to end up on that half-back line. And I think they're a side where we've shown in the past that there's just so many opportunities for all of their defenders to score. Plus you factor in like someone like Bonner, who was absolutely racking up last year, has now left the side as well. I was listening to a podcast with Brad Hill, was basically, and he let something slip in it, basically saying that their game plan in defence is to get the ball to Nazai Wanganeen-Millera and let him cook. So that's something he dropped. So I don't know if that's something to deter you, and maybe Naz might be the guy you go for. I don't know. But like I said before, I think with the St Kilda defence and just the way that they play in general, I don't think you should have any concerns about Jack Sinclair being a scorer this season.
I think their style is one of the highest scoring styles in SuperCoach. Lots of sort of chip mark sort of stuff, high possession, and Sinclair's great at that. So, ticks a lot of boxes for me. Dossie, am I getting this right? Heff has the next pick.
I think that's how it was supposed to be initially.
I'm so confused. Whose turn it is, but that's all right. I've got a couple I want to talk about. I haven't talked about a defender or a midfielder yet. I might throw... it's a bit hard now, it's not the injury, but I might throw Nick Daicos into the ring here. He's probably not someone we're going to... I guess it's early in the preseason, but with that foot injury, it makes it pretty hard to pick him. But I just want to kind of think about the Collingwood midfield makeup. And when you have a look at it, it is an aging midfield. And there are concerns about, someone like Daicos with that foot and everything. But if he gets that foot right whenever he comes in, I just don't see a world where he's just not, doesn't improve next season in terms of like, you got Pendlebury who's, getting ancient now. Is he 37? Have I got that correct? 37?
I'll look that up, but you could be right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like then you got Tom Mitchell. Like, I don't know how he gets back in that side, obviously, but they're rolling people like Crisp through there. Is DeGoey like 100% fit? Like in a world like where, all those guys are getting on in age, Nick Daicos just seems to be like the guy they're going to have to feed, especially if they're like hell bent on going, getting another premiership in the bag. I know they've picked up Dan Houston in their assault. They haven't really attacked the draft at all. Like they're wanting to win another flag. And if that's going to happen, I think Nick Daicos has to be that number one guy and should improve his average this season. It just depends on that foot and whether he can get that right before round one, I think. And that's thrown the spanner in the works. What do you guys think?
Just, Pendlebury turned 37 a week ago. And I'm not sure if you mentioned there, DeGoey is another one who's always got some injury concerns, and I think he does again this preseason. So, it's really, really Nick's midfield. I mean, the question I always wonder is, I get the idea of maybe not starting him, but then like, how do you get him? Like, he's never going to be cheap. And people thinking, I'll just grab him after the bye. What's that, in like round 4 or something? How are you finding, $650K at round 4 to do an early upgrade?
Yeah, look, bit before my time, but I think, was it Robert Harvey who jumped off the table to snap his plantar fasciitis? Right. Maybe we need some of that from Nick Daicos. I think, to your point, Heff, he was probably number one, on many of our radars, or at least top few options to be a premium this season, even with that bye, just because we know this type of player that he is, and he should be in that Bont stratosphere. Had a little bit of a down sort of early start to last season from memory as well. So while he is always going to be that number one tag guy, and you mentioned that midfield, it's just becoming pretty sparse at Collingwood in terms of who you rely on as you go-to guys. It's still very efficient, and it still should be okay going forward. I think we'll probably see the likes of someone like an Ed Allen we've talked about as a rookie option, maybe going in there to help out, and possibly even his brother if things are going that way. But I think Nick Daicos, for me, if we see that his running loads are all good, I'd be still willing to go there. But I think, at this point in the season, we're only in very early January, I'm, the plantar fasciitis news, given that he's on, I think, restricted training loads and stuff like that, I just can't bring myself to do it. Add in the early buy, and it's just a no from me at the moment, Horse.
Yeah, I'm with you on the fade. Let's put the plantar fasciitis to the side. He averaged 74% centre bounce attendances last year and improved his average in SuperCoach from 116 to 117. So he was playing a more of a role in the engine room for Collingwood, but yet performing to the level, if not just that little bit better than the year 2023, where he was racking it up across halfback and being that main ball distributor. If he is healthy, I'm interested to see how Dan Houston affects his ability to run free, because Dan Houston, he's a very, very good player. And across halfback, we saw it at Port, your Port man, Heff, uses the ball really, really well. And if he gets on top of opposition, they're going to need to worry about his disposal efficiency moving forward of centre. So this may only help Daicos as well.
Yeah, I was just looking at the fixture, and they play GWS in opening round, so maybe a Toby Bedford tag sitting there. So that we know opening round scores don't count towards SuperCoach, but it'll be interesting to see if that turns people off, or maybe we can try and factor in a little early price drop or something. But that'll be an interesting one to watch very early in the season. But he has been in and out of my teams at different stages, so we'll obviously be watching the injury news extremely closely out of Collingwood to see how he's tracking, but plenty of time before round 1. Horse, you've got one more name in this mini draft format.
Yeah, let's go Maxi Gawn. So Father Time does catch up with footballers from time to time, but Maxi Gawn, it felt like he had a down year last year, but he still averaged 124 SuperCoach points per game at 1.17 points per minute. At 19 disposals a game, and also 2.34 per game, which is the most of his career, he still looks to be performing at quite a good level. 668K seems about right for me, for Maxi. You know what you're going to get. This could be the year of the days of the Grundy and the Gawn. You set and forget, but it's Cherry and Gawn this year. 34 hitouts per game. And one other thing I'll add, a fit Clayton Oliver at his feet will help improve the hitouts to advantage. And you may even see some scores, improve from last year.
His ceiling is really just unrivaled in the ruck. We talk about this is sort of half a dozen scores from last season: 162, 177, 162, 180, 177. So Cherry, towards the end of the year, was putting up some pretty good numbers in the 140 sort of range, but Max is in his whole own sort of universe up there. I was a bit like you, looking up his numbers, thinking, geez, was he that good? Like, you just get so used to him. And thinking, maybe he's starting to drop off. No, 124 average. He's turned 33, but surely Melbourne improves. He's the captain. He's got, it's going to be a huge year for the Demons. And as you say, hopefully we'll see what happens with Petracca, but some of those guys back in the midfield to help him out. But it's just, can you fork out that huge amount of money in the ruck for him? And, we talked about how much we love Tristan Xerri.
Are we worried about the Tom Campbell factor that we've always been worried about with Rowan Marshall? Pretty funny story about Tom Campbell, and credit to Mick Barlow on the Footy and Friends podcast for this one. It's not my story, but apparently Tom Campbell has rocked up to his first day at a new job 3 times and then received a phone call that he's back on an AFL list and had to quit the next day.
Really?
So there might be a bit of mayo on that one. It might have only happened once or twice, but apparently it happened this year. So, personally, I'm not worried about the Tom Campbell. I think he's only there for the break glass in case of emergency, but I just wanted to throw that funny story into the podcast.
Yeah, I think he definitely retired after a year or two at the Saints, but now he's back at his fourth club. So, just one of the absolute great survivors in the AFL. I think he's wrote down here, 58 career games over 12 seasons, and he gets another one at the D's. But, yeah, you can't see them playing two rucks. Surely he's just there if Maxi breaks down, which, you sort of worry about his body, and he has, carried a few things over the last couple of years, but he's played 20, and 21 games the last 3 years. So he's sort of, would you be worried about that, Dossie? He sort of always misses a couple, but nothing sort of major there. And we do now have the flex to maybe provide a little bit of cover if he has a 1 week injury.
Yeah, he's going to be an interesting one. I will sort of tease out another podcast coming your way, but we've got some ownership numbers from the team picker, and I'm kind of wondering where he would sit in that list. I'm just going to look. So Max Gawn, 17% is his current ownership percentage in team picker, which is obviously very early days, but that's probably the lowest you've had Maxi Gawn for a number of years, I'd imagine. So I'm my leaning towards those big dog premiums is now towards a Tristan Xerri, and it's kind of the new generation. But I think to Heff's point earlier in the show, Xerri's age is very baby for a ruck, and Maxi Gawn, while he is 33, that's still prime years for many ruckmen in the past. So I wouldn't start thinking on the age factor for Gawny. I think he's still got a number of good years. And this year, if he's sort of even more of a pod when the real game comes out and we see those ownership numbers, he could be a great starting pick to sort of get you going and break away. So I don't have a heap of thoughts. I haven't thought about him too much in my team, but maybe I should be sort of not skipping over him so quick because he has done it many times in the past.
Looking at his early fixture, opens no opening round, so no early bye, which is nice. Plays GWS, Kieran Briggs in round 1, which is usually pretty. Briggs gives up some points in the ruck, so you can expect a big one there. Then he's got Cherry in round 2, so that'll be huge. Jared Witt's not the easiest. Then round 4 he comes up against Geelong, so who knows who's going to be playing in the ruck for the Cats. There's an opportunity there, and then round 5 the Bombers. So yeah, you could put some big numbers on the board early.
Could be huge.
Dossie?
Yeah,
that leaves us with you.
I'm gonna be the sort of devil's advocate here and go with another forward premium, just because I know a lot of people want to go that value in the forward line this year. I'm certainly one of those people, but looking at an Izak Rankine from the Crows coming in as the second highest priced player in our forward line for 2025. Oh no, behind Dylan Moore. Third, sorry. But Izak Rankine last year, he does have a couple of injury games in there baked in. I was actually an owner at one point last year, and the thing that stood out to me was this guy plays a ridiculous amount of time on ground. Now, you might not see that when you look at his stats from last year. I think he's around just over 80% last year. The year before, it was 90% time on ground, and he retained that last year, even despite playing additional midfield minutes last year. So I think that's going to continue for him. I think he'll still get some midfield time. I know James Peatling has come in at the Crows, but I think we'll see Izak Rankine still splitting time between mid and forward. And just with how damaging he is, he could be a real point of difference in your forward line, as opposed to I do think a Horne-Francis is a much safer sort of option. But if you don't trust those mid-price option, or if you're worried about being heavy in the buy and you want to fade someone like a Bailey Smith, I could see an Izak Rankine, performing really well as a forward mid who, as we know, those damaging disposals and those game-winning goals and stuff like that, that is where Izak Rankine makes his bread and butter. So as a nice little unique forward pick and a forward premium, I don't think we're talking about our forward premiums outside of a Jason Horne-Francis, so I thought I'd throw in an Izak Rankine, who was a favourite owner of mine last year when I did have him in my side. Mainly, as I said, due to super high time on ground and still being able to run out through the midfield.
Heff, have you had much of a look across town at how the Crows will shape up this year? A few ins and outs on their list. And Matthew Nick's obviously under the pump.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't see an increase in his midfield usage. We talked about Sid Draper at the start of the pod. I know he's had some back issues, I think, at the moment. And then Peatling comes into that midfield. So I don't see a world where he increases that midfield usage, but I do think he maintains that midfield because he just provides that flair, that something a little bit different for them that gets them up and going when they really need it. It's just, there was a few games, I think, last year where we saw, 70% CBAs, 60% CBAs, 50% CBAs. I don't think we see those again. But if the Crows are to improve with these new midfielders that they are bringing in, they should see more time in the balls forward and their forward line as well. So that could just get to, a few extra goals for him and stuff like that. That could help him out there too. So whilst I'm not as big on him going much larger than last season, I don't see him falling away, and he's a completely serviceable forward, on those numbers.
What are your thoughts? Also, I know I actually picked up Rankine last year too. It might have been my last trade. And I remember, I think I put a tweet out before I brought him in saying, should I be worried about Rankine's durability because he's only played 2 games, in the second half of the year. But really, it was a bit of a joke because one of them was, hammy, which he missed about 4 weeks, and then he had a huge suspension. And then next thing you know, he gets knocked into next week by Dan Houston. So maybe I should have been worried about that. But is that a factor, Horse? And just, looking at that forward line, it does seem to be the default. Everyone this year is just going maybe Horne-Francis and then just all the mid-prices. Is there something to be said for picking 1 or 2 actual premiums who you think can score, maybe 100 points each week?
Yeah, I'm with Heff on this one. I think his centre-bounce attendances go down from those 60, 70% games where he was spending a lot of time in the midfield. But overall last year, he was still 38% CBAs. You've got the likes of James Peatling coming to the Crows, who will take away from that time. But I think it'd be reasonable to expect a rotational role through the midfield, 20 to 25% CBAs. And that SuperCoach average of just under 97, pretty serviceable to be able to maintain that, if not increase that by a couple. As a forward premo, he's got that really, really high ceiling, but he's also got a low floor as well.
Yeah, that's something to keep in mind. But he does have, as Dossie mentioned, a couple of injury games, which maybe discount him a tiny bit. So even if he basically matches what he did last year, he should increase his average by a couple of points. But yeah, probably not a huge amount of value there, but definitely someone we should keep in mind. That is a wrap for all the premiums that we wanted to throw up today. We've nearly got an hour talking about them, so plenty of fantastic names there and potential big scorers in SuperCoach and lots of thinking to do. Yeah, a lot of those, 50-50 calls. Do I go a Serong or a Tom Green in the midfield or a Daicos, someone like that? And then by the time you move one to the other, then it allows you to switch something else and then you can't remember how to get back to where you started. It's what tends to happen in my team. But Dossie, can you remind everybody what's next on the agenda and where can they catch us all for all the shows we've got coming up?
Yeah, well, we've got our final sort of little podcast all together here coming up. I think that'll be the ownership podcast that we're going to be looking at, as I teased before. Team Picker, we're going to be looking at some of the stats of the highly owned players and some of the sort of points of difference that maybe we didn't mention on this show that people aren't picking at the moment in Team Picker. So keen to look into some of those numbers. You can't actually see it in Team Picker, so we're sort of exclusively revealing those Team Picker numbers on the podcast coming up. And then we've got so much more coming up as well. So I know the Phantom will be back on deck soon. Plenty of content coming your way. But keen to hear these guys. And thanks so much for joining us, Horse and Heff. Horse, where can we find you, mate? And on the socials and also your podcast and YouTube.
Yep. So Insight Fantasy Sports is who we are. We cover AFL, BBL, NBL, NRL, you name it. We just love sport. So get across on Twitter, Insight Fantasy Sports, or me at SC Horse, Instagram, Facebook, all good social media platforms. You can also find us on all good audio platforms.
Awesome. And Heff, now I know fantasy is your background, but you have beaten me the last couple of years in SuperCoach Classic as well, which, to be fair, isn't that hard to do. But where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at HeffKL and the podcast at Keeper League Pod there. But we also got the website, keeperleaguepod.com.au. Bunch of resources that they go across all the fantasy platforms, CBA numbers, kick-in numbers, analysis on all that sort of stuff as well. Any type of data analysis is on the website as well that we do. So, you can check us out at keeperleaguepod.com.au there also.
Thanks very much, guys, for joining us. And, as I said, Plenty more content to come on the official SuperCoach podcast. Check us out on wherever you listen to your audio platforms. Give us a rating and review there. We'd really appreciate that this preseason, to let us know you're enjoying the plenty of content that we are putting out this preseason. And also follow us along on Code Sports YouTube if you're not already. Another podcast coming later this week. Stay tuned. We'll see you very soon.